Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
And that denial, that right there, is the very crux of how we got here today, with a jury getting ready to decide the fate of the first ex-president to face criminal prosecution. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. Yeah, tonight we are tracking two moments in history, the likes of which we've never seen before. In the Middle East, all eyes are on Israel, who has vowed to strike back at Iran for their massive drone and missile attack this weekend. We're going to get to that in just a bit. But first, we start here in the United States. And the first time we're seeing a former president in court facing a criminal trial. Now, Trump is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records, and all of it stems from that $130,000 hush money payment made to porn film star Stormy Daniels, which you just heard the former president deny back in April of 2018. He is still denying all of it, pleading not guilty to the charges. But the payment was made by his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who is central to this case. And Trump then repaid Cohen in installments, which was marked as legal fees in business records. Now, this case requires Trump to be in a Manhattan courthouse for 4 days a week for at least 8 weeks, something he clearly was not happy about.
I can't go to my son's graduation, or that I can't go to the United States Supreme Court, that I'm not in Georgia or Florida or North Carolina campaigning like I should be. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want.
Now, the trial started with a roller coaster of a jury selection. A number of potential jurors excused immediately after they said they did not think they could be impartial in this case. And let's get into all of it with NBC's Dasha Burns. Dasha, what was the vibe at the courthouse tonight?
Well, it was interesting, Gadi. The vibe outside the courthouse and inside the courthouse could not have been more different. Outside, you had a cadre of Trump supporters and anti-Trump protesters, folks in dinosaur costumes, huge trucks with Trump flags blaring their horn, protesters chanting on both sides of this issue. Inside the courthouse, though, it was much more solemn, much more serious. The former president was stoic through much of the proceedings, even as some of the more tawdry and salacious details from this case were discussed by both his defense attorneys and the prosecution. I'm talking that infamous Access Hollywood tape, his alleged affairs with Stormy Daniels and another woman, Karen McDougal. Trump really just sitting there, sometimes closing his eyes, and through the second part of the hearing, really talking a lot with one of his attorneys, Todd Blanche. But overall, a very serious tone inside the courtroom and a lot of reaction outside, Gadi.
Yeah, underscored by a pretty striking moment when the judge warned Trump about jail time, right? How did that come up?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Two different times when possible jail time was mentioned for the former president. One with regard to the warning that he does need to be present each and every day of this trial unless he gets specific dispensation not to be there. Basically saying if you don't show up, there will be a warrant out for your arrest and you will go to jail. Another moment in the hearing, Gadi, was an argument about the gag order that has been placed on the former president. The prosecutor saying he violated that with some of his True Social posts, asking the judge to fine him $1,000 for 3 different posts, so $3,000 in total, and asking the judge to warn Trump that if he continued to violate that gag order, that there could be jail time in the future. We're expecting the judge to have a hearing on that particular issue, the gag order, next week, Gadi.
Meanwhile, Dasha, the jury selection, I mean, how's it going considering that this case has taken place in one of the bluest of the blue counties in the United States?
Right, and just about everybody has an opinion of former President Trump. In fact, anyone who's completely neutral might not be fit for a jury. So this is a process that began today. They only got through 10 jurors today, and there were 500 waiting, 6,000 on deck this week. So it's going pretty slow to start here. But this is the most exhaustive survey that they've ever created for a jury in this court, at least according to the judge. 42 questions will be asked of the these jurors. Questions like, have you ever gone to a Trump rally? Where do you get your news? What podcasts do you listen to? Where does your spouse or partner work? Are you a member of the Proud Boys or Antifa? So a lot of questions trying to get to, whether or not these folks can be impartial, because that is going to be absolutely critical. 12 jurors, 6 alternates, a lot of prospective jurors right now, but a lot of folks, even just today, 96 people in the courtroom. The judge asked, if you feel you cannot be impartial, excuse yourself. And more than half of those 96 jurors, prospective jurors, raised their hands and left the courtroom, Gadi. So this is going to be a tough task.
Yeah, even with those numbers, 96 plus 10, I mean, they've gone through maybe 100 with hundreds, if not thousands more to go. Dasha Burns, thanks so much. We look forward to more of your coverage. And let's bring in NBC News now, legal analyst Angela Sinandela. Angela, the jury selection in this case is so interesting. So many got excused today. Trump's lawyers are looking for some red in a sea of Democratic blue out there in New York. The obvious question I imagine that they'd want to ask is, who did you vote for in the last election? But they can't ask that, can they?
No, Gadi, you're right. They cannot ask that specific question, but they can do so much to contextually get an answer. And that is where jury consultants come in, and they sit in the room and they actually build these profiles of the jurors that go beyond even what just their answers are. This is what's most fascinating, is that even though in that room you'll only hear the answers, these consultants are looking at things like the body language, how they're moving, and then most fascinatingly, of course, Google searches and social media. Because whereas the public will not have access to the names of the jurors, the attorneys will, and they will immediately go and see what people have been posting online, and if that matches up with what the answers they've been given, and then try to see who are the best jurors. So it is an exhaustive process, but I do think it's something that the judge seems to be really committed to trying to do in the most fair way. As Dasha said, this is the most exhaustive survey questionnaire that we have maybe ever seen, and that is because the judge seems to attempt to really try here to find a sea of fair jurors in what we know is a very blue city, Gadi.
Okay, Angela, so usually you hear about people lying to get off of a jury, but is there a chance with a case like this big, this much publicity, that you'll have jurors lying so that they can get on the case?
Gadi, yes. And so that is exactly what these people are going to have to figure out. By people, I mean consultants and attorneys, to try to read between the lines and look at social media and see whether or not their real life personalities match up to the answers that they are being given. Because not only is it just perhaps people who have this hidden political agenda who will want to go on, but also if you are a juror on this trial, it is almost guaranteed that you would get $1 million book deal at the end of this, Gadi.
Okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is you're essentially looking for somebody who may have been living under a rock, who hasn't followed anything related to the next election, who also has like ethics of stone where they don't want a book deal, but also is civic-minded enough to engage in this in a thoughtful way. Like, that seems impossible. Is it?
It is an extremely tough assignment, but it's not someone who just never reads the news, period. I think, for example, they ask, where do you get your news? And they list all of these different examples, from TikTok to the Wall Street Journal to CNN to NBC, etc. And in those questions, they're trying to see someone who gets a balanced look at their news, that they don't just go to one side or the other. So it's quite obvious, especially in a city like Manhattan, that you're not necessarily going to find a pool of jurors who are living under a rock. I mean, it's a small city. We're all on top of each other here. So I think it's more just trying to find people who aren't necessarily forward with their bias, or able to separate it, able to have a bias even, but still be impartial enough in judging the guilt or innocence of the former president.
Switching gears here, the threat of jail time came up today for violating the gag order and for missing court. And then you heard Trump complaining as soon as he walked out. Is that First Amendment, or is he starting to play with fire here?
Yeah, I mean, this is really tricky. He's certainly playing with fire here, and he is going to keep likely, I mean, just given his pattern, we expect that he's probably going to keep pushing the bar here. And, I mean, but look, the threat there is, will he ever end up in jail if he does actually violate any of this? I mean, likely not, Gadi. I don't think there is a judge that in this country who is going to be willing to take that step, given that it is a campaigning president, regardless of the political leanings, because judges generally want to stay out of of the fray. They don't want to involve themselves in an election like this. So I think even though he's playing with fire, he's also aware of the odds, and he's playing them to get results in his favor, Gadi.
Angela Sinandela, appreciate you so much. Meanwhile, in Israel and in Iran and across the Middle East, another extremely uneasy night as the world waits to see how Israel will attack Iran after Israel fended off over 350 drones, rockets, ballistic missiles fired by Iran over the weekend. It is the first time an attack like that has ever been launched against Israel from Iranian soil. The biggest drone attack the world has ever seen, and it's got to be one of the least effective mass air bombardments in recent history. Israel and its Iron Dome, as well as the U.S. and British forces involved, and notably Saudi Arabia and Jordan, shooting down 99% of the bombs that were launched. Israel has vowed to retaliate. So tonight, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It's a question of how. And tonight, 4 U.S. officials tell NBC that they think that the Israeli military response will be limited in scope, but much remains uncertain. At any moment, the tensions in the Middle East could escalate and plunge the region into even more chaos. Here's NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez with the latest.
All across the Middle East tonight, people are holding their breath, waiting to see if this conflict between Israel and Iran will escalate further. Remember, this started back on April 1st when Iran says Israel attacked its embassy in Syria, killing 7 members of the Revolutionary Guard. Over the weekend, we saw that massive, unprecedented attack directly from Iranian soil against Israel. More than 350 drones and cruise missiles. The overwhelming majority, Israel says, were intercepted. But the question now, will Israel retaliate further? The Israeli War Cabinet met earlier today to ponder exactly that question. An Israeli official tells me the consensus among Israeli decision makers is Israel must respond, and it must respond swiftly. This official says Israeli retaliation at this point may be imminent. They say a range of military and diplomatic options were considered inside of the Israeli War Cabinet, and that any response will be coordinated with the United States. But this is not the answer that President Biden was hoping for. He, the rest of the White House, believed that Israel won a significant victory on Saturday night when, along with the U.S., with the U.K., with some Arab states, including Jordan, they destroyed 99% of those incoming drones and missiles, only very minimal damage to an airbase here in Israel. The hope had been to draw a line after that, but Israel is signaling tonight it will respond. The chief of staff of the Israeli military was at that airbase in the south of the country earlier today, watching F-35s taking off. He says an Israeli response is coming. Meanwhile, a 7-year-old girl from the south of this country is still in hospital. She is fighting for her life. She suffered shrapnel injuries to her head after a missile was intercepted over her home, according to the Israeli military. She is the only known serious injury as a result of this Iranian attack. Israel's military did impose restrictions on the civilian population in this country, but they have now lifted. So schools are open again. Large gatherings are once again allowed. But the military is saying tonight that it will reimpose those restrictions if there is further escalation and if there is a need to put them back on. Back to you.
Raf Sanchez, thanks so much. Now, if you were glued to the coverage of those unprecedented attacks this weekend, the largest attack using drones the world has ever seen, then it's natural that at some point you might have wondered, wait, is this what the beginning of World War III could look like? Because I got to admit, that's what crossed my mind. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist here. In fact, we're trying really hard to do the opposite of that and to delve into all the reasons why things may be more complicated than we first assume. And there is one article that I read today that really highlighted a lot of the nuances that are missing from the normal headlines we see. So we invited one of the writers of that article, Daniel Byman, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and professor at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start really bluntly, with that World War III question, it's something that we heard over and over again in conversation over the weekend. Do you think that we're on the precipice of an all-out war? Could we see a lot more restraint here than you'd think after you see one country lob hundreds of bombs at another country 1,000 miles away? Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Let's start with the Iranian attack itself. As you said, the scope was tremendous. Huge numbers of drones, ballistic missiles, really massive. But at the same time, there were a lot of limits, and those are a little harder to see, but they're important. Iran gave plenty of warning, and that allowed Israel to have its people take shelter. They could cancel school. Israel has great air defenses, and the United States and other countries also pitched in. So Iran probably knew that most, in fact, almost all of what it sent was going to be shot down. In addition, Iran did not involve the Lebanese Hezbollah, a militant group right on Israel's border that has a massive arsenal of its own that could overwhelm Israel's defenses. So Iran, in a strange way, was both trying to show strength, but also trying to show restraint. And we're waiting to see how Israel will respond.
In your article, you call Hezbollah the ace in the pocket, I believe, or something along those lines. When we're talking about 350, that sounds massive when we've never seen that amount of drones and missiles in the sky live before. But when we're talking about Hezbollah, what could an all-out assault look like?
Well, Hezbollah has lots of different weapon systems, but the general estimate, it has over 150,000 rockets and missiles. And Israel's air defenses are great, but if you throw enough out there and they get, say, 95% of this, still that's 5% that's going to go through, and that's going to do some damage. Some of Hezbollah's systems are precision guided, so they can actually hit what they're aiming at. And this has the potential not just to be a nuisance, but to be a truly mortal threat to many Israelis.
I don't want to read in too much here, but is there a chance, I mean, did Tehran actually think that this was going to be seen as some sort of success by the international community? Or could they be playing like a long game, trying to see where the air defenses are, possibly causing Jordan and Saudi Arabia to tick off their populations even more by getting involved? Do you think that this could have been a lot more strategic than people think?
I don't think so. I think that, first of all, Iran thought probably a few more would get through. I mean, this operation almost completely failed, and I think Iran thought a lot of it would be shot down, but more would get through. But also, a lot of what Iran was doing was sending a message to its own people. Its internal propaganda within Iran is saying, we stood up to the Zionist aggressor, we are fighting back, and you could point to this massive set of weapons they sent over. So a lot of their audience is really people at home, not the international community.
And we're looking at a map right now, and you got to remember that Jordan, Saudi Arabia, if Israel is to attack Iran, and while Iran attacked Israel, a lot of it went over Jordan, went over Saudi Arabia. If Israel decides to send salvos that way over Jordan and Saudi Arabia, would Saudi Arabia and Jordan be shooting down Israeli rockets or Israeli drones or possibly Israeli aircraft headed towards Iran?
That seems unlikely for several reasons. First of all, Saudi Arabia in particular, also Jordan, they see Iran as an enemy. And part of the reason that Saudi Arabia was engaged in negotiations with Israel before October 7th and the Hamas attack was because of their shared concern over Iran. In addition, the Israeli systems are a lot better than the Iranian ones. So it'd be much harder to shoot down. They would take countermeasures. Israel has planned for possibilities of going after Iran. So I think it's a much harder task and also a much less likely move by these governments.
Now, in the past, we've seen Israel's foreign policy be dictated by like this idea that if you punch us, we're going to punch you 10 times harder. When it comes to Iran and Iran's policy of deterrence, what do they have at play here? I mean, is there a possibility that they may have like a dirty bomb or something up their sleeves?
So Iran tends to work asymmetrically, and it's more likely to do something like a terrorist attack. And what we've seen in the past is Iran, often working with a group like Hezbollah, has done terrorist attacks on Israeli and Jewish targets in Argentina, in Bulgaria. So Iran is more likely to spread where it's going to attack and try different areas. And it will try assassinations, it'll try cyber attacks, but it is a country that has a very weak military in the end. And so its options are limited, even though in the past it's certainly been able to kill people.
Professor Byman, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, we cannot thank you enough for all of this context. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Meanwhile, all this comes as President Joe Biden hosted the Iraqi prime minister at the White House today, and the visit was planned well before the strike in Israel, and the two world leaders were set to discuss U.S.-Iraq relations, but obviously all eyes have been on the growing conflict in the Middle East. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more.
Gadi, the U.S. is walking a very fine line here. On one hand, the White House is making it clear that it supports Israel's right to defend itself. On the other, the president is trying to de-escalate the situation. He spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu over the weekend following Iran's attack, urging restraint. And a senior administration official tells NBC News the president told Netanyahu to take the win, and that although the White House's commitment to defend Israel is ironclad, the U.S. would not participate in offensive operations. Look, Gadi, that's the private messaging, but publicly the White House is choosing its words very carefully. Today, the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said that the U.S. is not involved in Israel's decision. And he also stressed that Iran did not provide the U.S. with advance warning of its timetable for launching an attack on Israel. So at this point, there are several unanswered questions about the way forward. For the U.S., some Democrats have been also ramping up pressure on the White House to condition future military aid to Israel if the war in Gaza continues. And so far, we're told that the president has implied that as much in private conversation, but he certainly hasn't said that publicly. It is clear that the relationship between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu is frayed quite a bit since the start of the war. But as for any limitations, Gadi, there's a very real question about whether Netanyahu would even listen at this point. Still, as the White House points out, the prime minister did agree to more humanitarian aid concessions when the two leaders spoke a few weeks ago after the killings of those World Central Kitchen workers. Bottom line, the U.S. is urging restraint here. We'll see how Israel responds. Gadi?
We'll see indeed. Gabe Gutierrez, thanks. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, the FBI just opened a criminal investigation into that deadly Baltimore bridge collapse. Plus, the armor on the Rust movie set is heading to prison, and apparently she wants Alec Baldwin locked up as well. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Over the weekend, a mass shooting at a family gathering in Chicago left a 9-year-old girl dead and 10 others hurt. The two boys, a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old, are still in critical condition. Chicago police think that gang-related violence might have been behind it. Also in Illinois, Christian Soto, the man charged with stabbing 4 people to death last month, was in court this morning. A judge says Soto needs to get a psych evaluation to see if he's mentally fit to stand trial. His hearing is next in May. And more turmoil for Tesla today. The company told workers it would lay off more than 10% of the workforce to cut costs. It's about 14,000 people who found out via an email from Elon Musk. Tesla shares were down about 5% this afternoon following that news. And Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was MIA from court this morning with no explanation. He didn't show up remotely either. Chief Justice John Roberts announced Thomas's absence, but said that Thomas would still be able to participate in the day's cases based on the briefs and the transcripts of the arguments. And earlier today, hundreds of thousands watched the Boston Marathon and saw Kenya's Helen Obiri win her second straight women's race, while Ethiopia's Cisse Lema took it home for the men. 22-year-old Eden Rainbow Cooper became the first woman from Great Britain to win in a wheelchair in the division of that marathon. And Marcel Hug, a.k.a. the Silver Bullet, broke his own course record in the men's wheelchair race. It looks like salvage divers have found the body of another missing construction worker who was killed in that deadly bridge collapse in Baltimore. No word yet on his identity, but it comes on the same day that the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the crash and what may have caused it. And that's according to 2 senior officials. Now, federal agents climbed aboard that massive cargo ship with a search warrant this morning. Sources say they'll be looking into what happened before the ship crashed and what the crew knew about any possible mechanical problems. NBC News intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian has more.
Gadi, two senior law enforcement officials confirmed to NBC News that the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the circumstances under which that massive cargo ship slammed into a pillar and took down the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore last month. And that investigation came into view when FBI agents boarded and began searching the ship in what turned out to be a day-long affair this morning. And sources tell us that the FBI is looking into, in part, the question of whether the crew left port knowing that there were mechanical or other system problems with this ship and left anyway. And because it's unclear at this moment exactly what caused the ship to lose power and again drift into that pillar. You'll recall that 6 members of a repair crew who were working on the bridge at the time fell into the water and died. Now, this criminal investigation is completely separate from a review by the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, which is trying to get to the bottom of what happened. The chairman of that body told Congress that they are looking into, in particular, the electrical systems on the ship because the lights went out and then came back on shortly before the accident. The fact that the FBI was able to get a search warrant, though, from a judge, and FBI and Justice Department officials confirmed that, shows that they had probable cause to believe there was evidence of a crime on that ship, whether from the data or including in talking to some of the crew members who remain on the ship. But again, significant development, criminal investigation, trying to get to the bottom of whether anyone broke the law as part of this horrific accident. Gadi?
Chandelian, thanks so much. Now, when O.J. Simpson died last week, he left behind a massive amount of debt, and the vast majority, alleged to be over $100 million, was owed to the families of the 2 people he was accused of killing. And now the person left to carry out O.J.'s estate, who originally promised a 0 payout for the Goldman and the Brown families, is all of a sudden reversing course, saying any claims will be accepted. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson is here to break down the latest on this O.J. saga. So, Steve, the amount owed to both these families, it looks like we're talking $100 million here, but way back in the 1990s, it was originally a lot less. Where did this number come from, and what's going on with this about face?
Yeah, let's go back to the 90s, right? I think everybody remembers the criminal case, specifically the verdict. I mean, it is common to ask, where were you when that verdict was being read? I certainly remember where I was, but it's important to remember also that O.J. did lose a trial in the 90s as well. 95 was the criminal decision. 97 was the civil decision, a jury deciding that he was liable for the wrongful deaths of the victims in that criminal case. The payout was $33.5 million. Did they ever see a single cent of that? Well, yes, but not anywhere close to the whole of it. The estimate is maybe they got about 100,000. The answer, though, of why it's ballooned to more than 100,000 is simple. It's interest. These judgments accrue interest over time. I think in the early 2000s, it was somewhere around 50 million. Then it was ballooning to 70 million in the 2010s. And now, of course, it's over 100 million. But the question remains, will the Goldmans, will the Browns see any of it? We're not sure yet.
And so as it goes, we saw the executor of this will, of his estate, say they're not going to get any of it. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, half an hour ago, it seems like an about face here. What happened?
He walks it back. Not only does he quite literally walks. He says, I am walking this back. The comments were harsh. I think he learned what was obviously the truth from the very beginning, which he doesn't have the power to decide whether or not to block people from what happens. That is based on the law. He has a fiduciary duty to execute the law based on what a court says. This will end up in probate court. They will tell him where the money goes. Now, the question still remains, how much of it will these families see? That has to do with the order of operations of the law, which is essentially basically Uncle Sam gets first dibs, right? If O.J. Simpson owed any money to the IRS, they get it first. If there's any left over after that, then some claimants like the Browns and the Goldmans may get a right to it. And then obviously O.J.'s next of kin, but it first has to filter on down.
Do we know how much his estate is worth? I mean, are they going to be able to to pay Uncle Sam and possibly pay all this?
That's the question. That is the most unsatisfactory answer of the evening. We don't know what OJ's estate is worth. This executor has made comments that there isn't much left, that he still owes a substantial amount to the IRS, so it has to go through that first. And of course, now that OJ has died, they will assess, what were his properties worth in Nevada? What were his properties worth in California? Does he have any of that left over? They will total all of that up, even down to maybe like a bag of golf clubs, and they will decide how much of that estate can be paid off, and then how much of that filters down to everybody else who wants a piece. Got it.
Steve Patterson, thanks so much, brother. And coming up, the armor on the movie set of Rust was sentenced to prison today. So what does this all mean for Alec Baldwin? We've got those details. But first, you got to see this. This video shows a driver going too fast, too furious, trying to make a turn on a neighborhood street. That's when they ended up hitting the curb and went airborne into that house, slamming into the garage. You can see the car on the side, wedged between two pickup trucks in that aftermath. Now, the driver miraculously made it out okay and was taken to the hospital. The house, though, it's in pretty bad shape. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. A woman is suing Goofy. Yeah, the character Goofy. In this lawsuit, the woman says a Disney employee in a Goofy costume barreled towards her, falling on top of her. The suit actually claims she suffered physical injuries and emotional pain, according to the LA Times. It allegedly happened during a visit to Disney's California Adventure back in 2022. And a California women's prison is closing after inmates there were sexually abused. The abuse was so rampant, the inmates and workers called it the, quote, rape club. Officially, it is the Federal Correction Institute in Dublin, California. Several correction officers and the former warden have already been charged or convicted with crimes. The women housed at the prison will be transferred to other facilities. Coachella has wrapped up its first weekend in Indio, California. The festival saw some big stars like Lana Del Rey, Tyler, the Creator, and even No Doubt making a return to the stage. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift were even spotted dancing the night away. The festival is back next weekend for round 2. Meanwhile, Rust movie armorer Hannah Gutierrez-Reed will spend 18 months in prison for failing to prevent a live bullet from ending up on set in that deadly movie set shooting. This 26-year-old appeared stoic as the judge handed down her sentence earlier today. She was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter last month over the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Hutchins was shot and killed by a live round back in October 2021 after actor Alec Baldwin pointed the gun in her direction during rehearsals. Friends and family of Hutchins gave emotional statements in court today ahead of Gutierrez-Reed's sentencing, and even the judge didn't mince words.
You alone turned a safe weapon into a lethal weapon. But for you, Miss Hutchins would be alive, a husband would have his partner, and a little boy would have his mother.
It seems to me, or anyone that I've spoken to, that Ms. Gutierrez-Reed has ever demonstrated even the slightest bit of remorse for her actions, and instead chooses to throw blame at everyone but herself.
And some of those harsh words may have had something to do with calls Gutierrez-Reed made from jail, where she called jurors idiots and even said that she wants Alec Baldwin in jail as well. Still, today, she said she was sorry. She also begged for mercy.
My heart aches for the Hutchins family and friends and colleagues as well. And it has since the day this tragedy occurred. Helena has been and always will be an inspiration to me. The jury has found me in part at fault for this god-awful tragedy, but that doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human.
NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin joins us now. Dana, I gotta ask, what is up with these jailhouse phone calls she made?
Yeah, so they were pretty disparaging, not only against the jury, which she called idiots, a-holes. She actually called the prosecutor the B word and said that she believed that the judge was being paid off. This likely did not help her as she begged the judge to not give her jail time. The judge handed her the max, 18 months. She had 3 options. She could have given her probation. She could have kept her in jail for 12 months, but she said no. You showed no remorse, because even when she spoke, that was the first time we heard from her, she never took accountability and said the words, I'm sorry, it was my fault, or I apologize. She definitely, said she felt heartache for the family.
I heard the word partial in there, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah, but it didn't go to the, it did not make the judge feel that she was very remorseful, and I think that kind of sealed the deal for her.
Given how she feels towards Alec Baldwin, based on her statements, what do you think is going to happen during his case? Could we see Hannah Gutierrez-Reed testifying against him?
Well, according to her jail conversations released by the prosecution, she said that if she's subpoenaed, she will not show up because Baldwin did not show up for her. And I guess technically she doesn't have to show up, but you know, when you don't show up after being subpoenaed, you get you get thrown in jail. It's called contempt. So if she doesn't want to stay in jail, she might show up. But then at the same time, think about this. The prosecution didn't call Baldwin to testify in her trial, so they don't want a hostile witness on the stand, so they may not call her for his. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. We know the Baldwin team has been watching this case very closely, and knowing that he is facing the same charges and seeing the sentence that she got today, it's possible that his legal team is discussing what's the next move. Do we try to take a plea deal, or do we see this all the way through?
Is this the end of her legal troubles?
It is not. So according to the prosecution, she is also facing another felony weapons charge because she allegedly tried to sneak a gun into a bar during her time in New Mexico. And in this filing, I'll read it to you. It says, upon successfully circumventing the security at the bar, she went into the restroom and made a selfie video stating, "They checked my purse, but they didn't check my butt cheeks."
Wow.
Yeah.
Dana Griffin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And still to come, police in Nevada are trying to find two men who damaged an ancient rock formation, and it was all caught on camera. That's just ahead, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Gridlock for hours. Protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza brought traffic to a standstill in some of the country's busiest places today. That story and those striking pictures are coming up. But first, let's take a quick look around the world. Another stabbing attack in Sydney, Australia. This one happening during a live stream of a church service. At least 4 people were stabbed, including the bishop. Police there say none of the injuries appear to be that serious, and a 15-year-old is in custody. Today's attack comes just 2 days after that deadly stabbing at a mall in Sydney that killed 6 people. And an investigation has taken place in Beijing over a half marathon. A video of the event appears to show 3 African runners slowing down near the finish line so that a Chinese runner could win. One of the African runners even told a local news outlet that he let the Chinese athlete win because they are friends. The Beijing Sports Bureau tells NBC News that the results of the investigation will be, quote, promptly disclosed to the public. And nearly 200 people have been rescued after a cable car accident in Turkey over the weekend. One of those cars malfunctioned, hit a pole, and burst open, spilling the people inside onto the rocks below. At least 1 person was killed and several others were hurt. Now, the incident brought all the other cars to a screeching halt, leaving everyone stranded, and the cable cars were carrying tourists from a beach to a nearby mountain. And a search and rescue team is still combing an island in Indonesia, looking for 2 people missing after a series of landslides there. At least 18 people have been killed. Heavy rain turned surrounding hills into mud, which poured down onto several houses over the weekend. So far, rescue crews have managed to pull 2 people to safety, including an 8-year-old girl. And President Biden might have reiterated today that the U.S. is committed to a ceasefire over in Gaza, but all over this country, protesters took to the streets to demand it. And in San Francisco, we saw traffic blocked for nearly 5 hours on the Golden Gate Bridge. Officials said they expect upwards of 30 arrests in total there. And in Chicago, a similar scene at O'Hare Airport. Protesters linked arms and blocked lanes, forcing some travelers to walk to the airport along the freeway to try to make their flights. Authorities confirm several individuals were taken into custody there as well. And out of some shocking video showing 2 men destroying an ancient rock formation at a nationally protected park in Nevada. Officials now trying to track them down. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has more.
It's a moment all caught on video.
He's gonna fall.
2 men seen damaging ancient rock formations at Nevada's Lake Mead National Recreation Area outside Las Vegas. The vandals not once, but twice knocking massive redstone boulders off a cliff last week at the popular Redstone Dunes Trail. A young girl standing behind them screams out as the rocks come toppling down. Authorities with the National Park Service are now investigating and seeking the public's help to track down the 2 men. According to the park's website, the delicate rocks are millions of years old. Officials say vandalism at federally protected sites like this can result in felony charges, including fines and jail time.
A little bit.
Bad behavior is something park rangers have been dealing with for years.
Oh!
In 2013, Boy Scout leaders cheered as they toppled over an ancient rock formation in Utah. The men were sentenced to a year of probation and a fine. More recently, in 2022, Zion National Park reported widespread vandalism with people leaving graffiti on the historic sandstone. Rangers posted this video cleaning up the spray paint. Now, as officials search for the men responsible for this irreparable damage at Lake Mead, a reminder that breaking park rules comes with consequences.
This is a serious offense. According to a park official, these men could face potentially several months in prison and thousands of dollars in fines.
Liz Kreutz, thanks. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. Watch out, Apple. There is a new leader in town. Samsung just reclaimed the title as the world's biggest phone maker. We've got the details, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Now time for the future of everything. Samsung is taking a big old bite out of Apple. It was only in January that Apple ended Samsung's 12-year reign as the world's largest seller of smartphones, but already Samsung has taken that crown back after the biggest drop in iPhone sales since the COVID lockdowns. And here now is Joanna Stern, senior personal technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Joanna, thanks so much for joining us. A big news from Samsung here. Is this more of a loss for Apple or a win for Samsung?
I'd say it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both. What we typically see is sort of this back and forth between these companies. And a large part of why we saw the Samsung growth in these last quarters, or this last quarter, and IDC reporting that, is largely because Samsung had a big flagship phone release in January. And Apple hasn't had its big phone launch since September. We're now sort of mid-cycle for Apple. And so this kind of goes back and forth between which phone makers on top. Though what you're really seeing at large here is a play of these Chinese phone manufacturers, ones like Xiaomi, Vivo, really coming up ahead in China. And China is a big market for Apple and a place where they have continuously struggled with some of these other smaller Chinese smartphone makers.
So is that where they're picking up a lot of these new sales? Or, I mean, how much of this is people in the United States, like iPhoners, calling it quits?
I do not think we have a lot of iPhoners in the U.S. calling it quits. So I do think, there's something ironic or funny here about a couple of weeks ago, the DOJ launching a suit, an antitrust suit against Apple, saying they have a monopoly on smartphones. And yet here they are, the number two. And this isn't taking into account just the U.S., but this is worldwide shipments.
Yeah, so it's always this big divide, especially here in the United States, between Apple and Samsung users or any Android user, the green versus the blue text. What is the main selling point for Samsung when it comes to smartphones in the United States these days?
Well, look, the main points for smartphone buyers tend to be the same, right? They want big, nice screens. They want really good pictures and great camera. And then they want some new software features. But really, when you kind of look at where people buy, typically, we don't see a lot of switching anymore. So a lot of people buy their iPhones, and then the other people buy their Android or Samsung phones, mostly Samsung, if you're an Android phone owner in the US. But we are seeing this battle shift to AI now, right? And that is going to be the next big battle in smartphone sales. And Samsung, when they announced the Galaxy S24 back in January, made a big to-do about AI features. I mean, they are marketing it as an AI phone. And we're going to see Apple do some of that later this year. They released the new iPhone in September, but in June, they usually talk about the new software features, and we are expecting Apple to talk a lot about AI features then.
Okay, Joanna, some real talk. So I am an iPhone user, and just thinking about this, it would be like a phone divorce, breaking up with the iPhone. But I got to say, there are a couple of things that would definitely do it for me. Battery life is one of them. I got to say, the screen size is another. Are you an iPhone person or are you an Android person? It's hard. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm an iPhone. Yeah, I mean, I've got to reveal my. Here we go. I'm an iPhone person typically, but I do review Samsung phones and I do review Android phones, the Pixel or Samsung. So I switch between those, but I'm very much in the Apple world.
Okay, so you're in the Apple world. What are some of the top things that would entice you over to the Android side of things? Doing some market research for free here.
You're doing some market. Yeah, here we are. So I think you really hit on, it would be a divorce, right? And part of it anymore is not necessarily going to which is the best phone, but which is the one that you have friends on and you've got all other devices on. And that's largely a lot of the suit that the DOJ is bringing against Apple, which is they've made this walled garden. They've made it hard to leave for people, and they made it hard for you to use other devices with it. So I would say it would be pretty hard, and I think this is what happens for a lot of iPhone owners and even Android, right? You've got your Google services. You kind of have to have some amazing hardware, some amazing feature to get you to leave, right? Because you've already got this set ecosystem, and that's really the heart of some of the suits and some of the issues right now in terms of Apple's dominance.
Yep, it is the good old-fashioned phone divorce court. Joanna, thanks so much for joining us. And that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.